The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as a massive holographic display flickered to life at its center. 64 representatives from 37 different species leaned forward, their attention captured by the unknown vessel that had appeared at the edge of their territory. The ship's design was unlike anything in their extensive databases. Representative Ta stood up, his ceremonial robes flowing around him. He had served in the diplomatic corps for over 30 years, but even he seemed unsettled by this development. Esteemed colleagues, he began, his voice echoing through the chamber. Our border sensors have detected this unidentified vessel entering Council space near the Arcturus sector. He paused, consulting his datapad. After initial contact, the vessel has identified itself as the TES Resilient, a human exploration ship from a planet called Earth. Murmurs spread across the chamber. Several representatives turned to their aides, asking for information that wasn't there. Council Leader Day rose from her seat at the center of the assembly. Her silver eyes narrowed as she studied the hologram. The vessel had an elegant design, long and sleek with strange protrusions that might be sensors or perhaps weapons. Humans? She asked, her voice cutting through the whispers. We have no record of this species. How is this possible? Our galactic surveys are thorough. Ta bowed slightly. They appear to have developed faster than light travel independently. Their system is in an unexplored arm of the galaxy. He touched his datapad, and new information appeared beside the ship's image. Initial scans show unusual energy signatures in their hull composition. We haven't seen this technology before. Military Commander Jun's heavy fist slammed against the table, causing several representatives to jump. His species was known for their direct approach to problems. I don't like unknowns, he growled, baring his sharp teeth. Unknown ships mean unknown threats. The Trigornian Apex is patrolling that sector now. We should intercept immediately and assess their capabilities. Leader Day considered for a moment. A reasonable precaution. How long until contact? The Apex can reach their position in under 3 hours, Jun replied. Representative Kyo from the peaceful Adari Collective raised a slender hand. Perhaps we should simply welcome them. Their message states they come in peace. That's what I would say too if I were entering territory controlled by 37 advanced species, Jun countered. Leader Day raised her hand to silence the debate. We will approach with caution but without hostility. Send the Apex. Open communications but maintain alert status. Hours later, the Council reconvened to watch the encounter. The chamber's massive display now showed a split view, the human vessel on one side and the Apex on the other. The Trigornian Apex was the pride of the Council fleet, 3 times larger than the human ship with weapon systems capable of reducing small moons to dust. The Apex commander's voice came through clearly. Unknown vessel, this is Commander Bin of the Galactic Council warship Apex. You have entered Council space without authorization. Identify yourself and state your purpose. After a brief delay, the screen filled with the image of a human female. She had dark hair pulled back from her face and wore a blue uniform with silver insignia. This is Captain Hyun of the TES Resilient. We come from Earth seeking peaceful contact with other sentient species. Her voice was calm and confident. We apologize for any alarm our arrival may have caused. We are an exploration vessel and seek diplomatic relations. Many council members studied the human with intense curiosity. Some used scanning devices to analyze her biology. She appeared similar to several humanoid species in the council, though with subtle differences. Commander Jun left his seat and approached Leader Da, leaning down to whisper in her ear. Their ship configuration is unusual. Look at those hull readings. Their defenses appear highly advanced, but in a way our sensors can't fully interpret. We should test them. Leader Da hesitated. A test could be seen as an act of aggression. Better to know their capabilities now, while they face our strongest ship alone, Jun insisted. After a moment of consideration, Leader Day gave a reluctant nod. The order was transmitted to the Apex. On the screen, Commander Bin's voice could be heard addressing the human. "We need to verify your peaceful intentions. Please hold position for a security scan." The human captain nodded. "Understood. We will comply." What happened next caused a ripple of shock through the council chamber. Without further warning, the Apex fired its forward plasma cannon, not at full power, but with enough force to cripple most vessels. It was a standard warning shot designed to test shields and demonstrate the Council's technological superiority. The bright blue plasma bolt streaked across space and struck the human ship directly on its port side. There was no explosion, no debris, no emergency signals. The energy of the plasma weapon simply disappeared into the hull, which glowed briefly with a bluish light before returning to normal. The council chamber erupted in chaos. "Impossible," shouted the technological minister. "Scan it again," ordered Commander Jun, his face twisted in disbelief. On the screen, Captain Hyun remained calm, though one eyebrow had raised slightly. "I understand your need to assess our capabilities," she said. "However, in the future, we would appreciate advance warning before weapons are discharged in our direction." Leader Dai stood, stunned like the others. Their most advanced weapons, technology that had kept the peace in the galaxy for centuries, had been completely negated by this unknown species. "How did they do that?" whispered Representative Kyo. "The energy just vanished." Defense expert Gil was frantically reviewing the data. "No known shield technology works like this. They didn't deflect the energy or absorb the impact with barriers. They somehow integrated the plasma directly into their hull." On the display, Commander Bin was demanding answers from the human captain. "Our sensors show no damage to your vessel. Explain your defense systems immediately." Captain Hyun smiled slightly. "The technology is called adaptive plasma integration. We developed it centuries ago as protection against solar flares from our sun. Instead of blocking energy, we found it more efficient to capture and repurpose it." Commander Jun's eyes widened with a mixture of fear and respect. "They've mastered energy conversion at a level we've only theorized." He turned to Leader Da. "This changes everything." Leader Day nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the human captain's calm face. "Indeed it does." She took a deep breath and addressed the council. "We may have just encountered the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, and they came seeking peace." The chamber remained in stunned silence as the implications of this first contact spread through the assembly like ripples in a pond. The Galactic Council chamber descended into chaos. Representatives from 37 species shouted questions and demands, some rising from their seats while others huddled with their advisors. Several military officials were already calling for reinforcements to the sector. Silence. Leader De's voice cut through the uproar, amplified by the chamber's acoustic system. She stood tall, her silver eyes flashing with authority. "What just happened?" she demanded, turning to her military and science advisors. Defense Minister Gil was frantically reviewing sensor data. The plasma bolt made direct contact, but their hull absorbed it completely. No deflection, no shield flare, no damage whatsoever. On the massive display screen, Captain Hyun of the human vessel remained calm. Her expression showed neither fear nor aggression, just patient professionalism. The lack of reaction was perhaps more unsettling to the council than any show of force would have been. "I understand your need to assess our capabilities," Captain Hyun said, her voice steady. "Such caution is reasonable when meeting an unknown species. However, we would appreciate advance notice before weapons tests in the future." Commander Jun stepped forward, his massive frame tense with suspicion. "How did you survive a direct hit from our most advanced weapons?" he demanded. "No known defense system could have neutralized that plasma bolt so completely." Captain Hyun nodded, as if the question were perfectly reasonable. "Plasma absorption technology is something we developed centuries ago as protection against solar flares from our sun." She paused, allowing her translator to catch up for the benefit of all council species. "Our ships are designed to capture and repurpose energy rather than deflect it. It's simply more efficient. Centuries ago, whispered Representative Keogh to her neighbor. What else have they developed since then? Commander June's eyes narrowed. This calm explanation made him more suspicious, not less. He turned to Leader Da. Permission to conduct a full capabilities assessment. Leader Da hesitated, but nodded. Granted. But Commander. June was already transmitting orders to the Apex before she could finish. Full weapons barrage, standard assessment pattern. All systems. Science Director Sun rushed forward. Leader Da, this is unnecessarily provocative. But it was too late. On the screen, they could all see the Apex repositioning, its weapon ports glowing as energy built up across multiple systems. Captain Hyun, Leader Day called out quickly. Our military force is conducting a standard capabilities assessment. Please understand this is protocol for first contact situations. If Captain Hyun was concerned, she didn't show it. Understood, Leader Da. We will maintain position and take no offensive action. The council chamber fell into tense silence as the Apex unleashed its arsenal. Plasma bolts, quantum disruptors, and graviton beams, weapons that had subdued rebellious planets and destroyed rogue asteroids, all struck the human vessel in quick succession. The effect was visually stunning, but not what anyone expected. With each hit, the hull of the Resilient glowed brighter, patterns of blue-white energy spreading across its surface like ripples in water. The ship remained completely intact, showing no signs of damage or stress. Most shocking of all, the human vessel made no attempt to return fire or even move out of range. After nearly 2 minutes of continuous assault, the Apex ceased fire. Commander Bin's voice came through, a note of disbelief evident even through the translator. Council Command, the target has absorbed approximately 87% of our weapons energy. Our sensors indicate their power reserves have increased by 23%. Before anyone could respond to this revelation, the Resilient transmitted a data package to the Council. Science Director Sun opened it immediately on the chamber's secondary display. This is remarkable, Sun exclaimed, her eyes widening as she scrolled through the information. They're not just absorbing the energy, they're converting it directly into usable power for their systems. She looked up, her expression a mixture of awe and confusion. And they're sharing how it works. These are detailed schematics and scientific principles behind their absorption technology. Commander June scoffed. It must be false information, a deception to lower our guard. No, Sun shook her head firmly, continuing to analyze the data. These principles are sound. I recognize the quantum mechanics foundation, though they've applied it in ways we never considered. She looked up, meeting Leader Day's gaze. They've mastered energy conversion at a level we haven't achieved, and instead of using it as leverage or keeping it secret, they're freely sharing it with us. Representative Ta stepped forward. This is unprecedented. In all our records of first contact situations, no species has ever immediately shared their most advanced technology. Leader Dai studied Captain Hyun on the screen. The human showed no signs of smugness or strategic calculation, only patient waiting. Captain Hyun, why would you share such valuable technology with strangers who just attacked your vessel? Captain Hyun considered this for a moment. Leader Dai, humans have learned through our own difficult history that technological secrets create fear and suspicion. We believe knowledge should flow freely, especially knowledge that can benefit all. But this technology gives you a significant military advantage, Commander June pointed out. We don't see it primarily as military technology, Captain Hyun replied. To us, it's an energy solution. On Earth, we use the same principles to capture solar energy and protect our atmosphere. The military application is secondary. Science Director Sun was still examining the data. Leader Da, this technology could revolutionize energy production throughout Council space. Worlds suffering from energy shortages could become self-sufficient. Captain Hyun spoke again. If I may, we have additional data on various implementations of this technology across different environments. We'd be happy to share our experiences. The council chamber had grown quiet, the initial panic replaced by cautious wonder. Representatives who had been shouting for military action now whispered among themselves about potential applications for their homeworlds. Leader Da slowly sat back in her chair, studying the human captain with new appreciation. Captain Hyun, your response to our rather hostile welcome has been extraordinary. I believe this calls for direct diplomatic talks. We would welcome that, Captain Hyun replied with a slight smile. Would you prefer we send representatives to your council, or would you like to send a delegation to our ship? Before Leader Dae could answer, Commander Jun stepped close to her chair. This could still be a trap, he whispered urgently. They've demonstrated defensive capabilities beyond our understanding. Who knows what offensive weapons they possess? Leader Dae considered his words, then looked back at the human captain waiting patiently on screen. If they wanted to attack, Commander, they've had ample opportunity. They absorbed our best weapons and didn't fire a single shot in return. She stood, addressing Captain Hyun formally. We would be honored to welcome a small delegation from your vessel to meet with the council, and perhaps you might demonstrate this remarkable technology in person. Captain Hyun nodded. We would be delighted, Leader Da. We've waited many years for this moment. First contact with another spacefaring civilization. Today marks the beginning of what we hope will be a long and beneficial relationship between humans and the Galactic Council. As arrangements were made for the human delegation's arrival, Science Director Sun approached Leader Da privately. In all my years studying advanced technologies, I've never seen anything like this, she admitted. But what's most remarkable isn't the technology itself. It's their willingness to share it. What kind of culture evolves to that point? That, Leader Dae replied thoughtfully, is what I'm most interested to discover. While arrangements were being made for potential face-to-face contact, Leader Dae called an emergency session of the Council's inner circle. Representatives from the 12 most influential species gathered in a smaller chamber adjacent to the main hall. Security protocols were at maximum level, with quantum encryption preventing any possibility of the humans intercepting their deliberations. Defense Minister Jin paced the circular room, his ceremonial armor clanking with each step. He had served through 3 major conflicts in Council space and bore the scars of 2 assassination attempts. They must have ulterior motives, Jin argued, his voice rising with frustration. No species would share such advanced technology without expecting something in return. That's not how the universe works. He stopped pacing to face the assembly. Look at our own history. When the Kraxan Empire developed quantum shielding, they demanded 7 resource-rich planets before sharing it. When the Adari created biological regeneration, they leveraged it for 2 centuries of trade advantages. Science Director Sun shook her head, the patterns on her skin shifting to indicate disagreement, a biological trait of her species. This situation is different, she insisted. While Minister Jin was arranging this meeting, my team has been analyzing the historical transmissions the humans included in their data package. She activated a holographic display showing various scenes from Earth history, primitive humans engaged in tribal warfare, later global conflicts with increasingly destructive weapons, and finally a unified global government. Their history shows a clear pattern. Humans have evolved from an extremely violent past. Their planet experienced 3 global wars, the last of which nearly rendered their world uninhabitable. She highlighted a series of images showing devastated cities. They united their planet after nearly destroying themselves and redirected their efforts toward exploration rather than conquest. Convenient story, Commander Jun scoffed, crossing his massive arms. A perfect narrative to lower our guard. For all we know, those transmissions are fictional creations. We should neutralize them before more arrive. 1 vessel we might contain, but a fleet with this technology could threaten the entire council. Military strategist Han, a veteran of countless campaigns, nodded in agreement. The commander makes a valid point. If we act now, we control the situation. If we wait, we risk losing that advantage. The debate might have continued along predictable lines if not for Ambassador Wu. The elderly diplomat had remained silent throughout the exchange, listening carefully while stroking his long white beard. As one of the oldest members of the council, his words carried special weight. "Honored colleagues," he began, his voice soft yet penetrating. "I have witnessed first contact with 17 different species during my service. I have seen deception, aggression, and manipulation." He paused, his ancient eyes scanning the room. "What I see in these humans is none of these things." He stood with some effort, leaning on his ceremonial staff. "What if we're witnessing something truly unprecedented? A species that has genuinely overcome its violent instincts." "Impossible," Jin muttered. "Violence is inherent to intelligent life." "Is it?" Ambassador Wu challenged. "Or is that merely the limit of our experience thus far? We pride ourselves on being an enlightened council, yet at the first sign of superior technology, our instinct is to attack or destroy." Science Director Sun nodded enthusiastically. "The ambassador raises an excellent point. Maybe humans represent what we all aspire to become, a species that has moved beyond using technological advantages for domination. Or perhaps they're simply better at hiding their true intentions than any species we've encountered before," Jin countered. "We cannot risk the security of 37 civilizations on philosophical optimism." The debate continued for hours, growing increasingly heated. The council remained deeply divided, with security and military representatives advocating caution or preemptive action, while scientific and diplomatic members pushed for engagement. Leader Day listened to all sides, asking occasional questions but reserving judgment. As the appointed leader of the council, her decision would carry tremendous weight, though the final determination would come to a vote. Just as the arguments began cycling through familiar points, a communication officer entered the chamber and bowed to Leader Da. "Forgive the interruption, but we've received a new transmission from the human vessel." Day gestured for the message to be played. Captain Hen's image appeared above the center of the table. "Greetings, Leader Da and representatives of the Galactic Council. We understand that our arrival presents many questions and concerns. To facilitate better understanding, we request permission to send a small delegation of 3 representatives to address the Council directly. We are prepared to submit to any security protocols you deem necessary." The message ended, leaving the chamber in silence. Defense Minister Jin was the first to speak. It could be a trap. They could be sending infiltration units or biological weapons. Their ship has absorbed everything we've thrown at it and hasn't fired a single shot in return. Leader Dai observed, her voice thoughtful. "If they wanted to attack, they could have already done so when we were most vulnerable, during our initial aggression." Ambassador Wu nodded. "Indeed. And what would be the strategic value in sending 3 individuals when their vessel clearly holds the tactical advantage from orbit? They could be planning to study our security from the inside," suggested Commander Jun, "or plant listening devices." Science Director Sun sighed heavily. "With technology advanced enough to absorb plasma weapons, do you really think they need physical access to monitor our communications?" Leader Day raised her hand for silence. "We have debated long enough. This will come to a vote of the full council." Within the hour, all 37 representatives had been called to the main chamber. The debate resumed briefly as those who had not been part of the inner circle discussions were brought up to speed. When all arguments had been heard, Leader Day called for the vote. "Those in favor of allowing a human delegation to address the council, indicate now." Lights flickered across the chamber as representatives made their choices. The tally appeared on Leader Day's private screen. 19 in favor, 18 opposed. "By the narrowest of margins," she announced, "the council has voted to allow the human delegation to arrive." Defense Minister Jin looked grim. "I hope we don't come to regret this decision." "All necessary security precautions will be taken," Leader Day assured him. "The delegation will be thoroughly scanned, and guards will be present at all times." "And if they do have hostile intentions?" Commander Jun asked. Leader Day's expression hardened. "Then they will learn that while we seek peace, we are not defenseless. Our combined fleets still vastly outnumber their single vessel, regardless of its defensive capabilities. As the council session ended, Ambassador Wu approached Leader Dai privately. You know, in all my years of service, I've noticed something interesting about first contact situations. What's that, old friend? She asked. How we respond says far more about us than about the species we're meeting. His ancient eyes twinkled. Perhaps these humans are offering us more than technology. Perhaps they're offering us a mirror. Leader Dad pondered his words as she prepared the formal response to the Resilient. Tomorrow would bring humans face to face with the Galactic Council for the first time. An encounter that might change the course of galactic history, for better or worse. 6 months after the first human delegation set foot in the Galactic Council chambers, the Great Hall looked remarkably different. The once austere space now featured a blend of traditional council architecture and human design elements. Soft lighting replaced the harsh illumination that had dominated for centuries, and comfortable seating areas encouraged informal discussions between sessions. Human representatives now held permanent seats in the assembly, their blue uniforms standing out among the diverse attire of the 37 other species. The atmosphere had transformed from one of rigid protocol and guarded suspicion to genuine cooperation and exchange. Leader Day entered the chamber, pausing to admire how much had changed in such a short time. She recalled the tense days following first contact and how close they had come to making a terrible mistake. Now, it seemed almost impossible to imagine the council without human involvement. The session will begin shortly, announced her aide. Day nodded and took her place at the center of the assembly. One by one, the representatives filed in, many engaged in animated conversations with their human counterparts. Even Commander Jun, once the most vocal opponent of human integration, was deep in discussion with a human military advisor. When all were seated, Leader Day called the assembly to order. Today's primary agenda item is a report on the Joint Exploration Initiative, she announced. I invite Ambassador Hyun to address the council. Captain Hyun, now Ambassador Hyun, approached the central platform. In the months since her ship had first appeared in council space, she had become a respected figure throughout the galactic community. Her calm diplomacy during those tense early days had set the tone for all that followed. Honored representatives, she began, activating the holographic display. I am pleased to report that the first fleet of the Joint Exploration Initiative is ready for departure. The display showed 12 vessels in orbit around Centauri Prime. At the center was the TES Resilient, now retrofitted to serve as the flagship of this unprecedented venture. Around it were ships of various designs, each representing different council species, all modified with human plasma absorption technology. With the integration of human energy systems, these vessels can travel farther and collect data more efficiently than any previous exploration fleet. Han explained. But more important than the technological advancements is what these ships represent, a true collaboration across species lines. Science Director Sun rose to add context. Before human plasma absorption technology, energy scarcity drove many conflicts in council space. 3 ongoing resource wars have now ended because the combatants no longer need to fight over energy sources. Ambassador Hyun nodded gratefully at Sun's contribution. The expedition team includes scientists and crew members from all council species, she continued, including our newest members from the Croton Empire. All eyes turned to Emperor Ji, whose people had been the last to accept human technology and join the expanded council. The Crotons had a long history of isolation and aggression, preferring conquest to cooperation. Their inclusion in the joint initiative represented perhaps the most dramatic shift in galactic politics. Emperor Ji rose from his seat, his ceremonial armor glinting in the chamber's light. My people have much to learn about strength through openness, he admitted, his deep voice carrying unusual humility. For millennia, we believed power came from what we could take and keep for ourselves. The humans have demonstrated a different kind of strength, one that grows by being shared. Leader Dad watched this exchange with satisfaction. 6 months ago, The very idea of a Croatan emperor speaking of openness would have seemed absurd. Yet here they were, witnessing what many had thought impossible. In the center of the chamber stood the most visible symbol of this transformation, a monument that had been unveiled just 1 month earlier. It was a simple sphere, 3 meters in diameter, that absorbed light from all directions and converted it into a gentle, steady glow that illuminated the entire room. The technology was human, but the design had been a collaboration between artists from 15 different species. Around its base, inscribed in the languages of all council members, was a simple message: in honor of first contact with humanity, who taught us that the strongest defense isn't in our weapons, but in our willingness to share, learn, and grow together. As Ambassador Hyun concluded her report, she invited the assembly to join her on the great observation deck for the departure ceremony. The representatives filed out of the chamber and made their way through the council headquarters to the massive transparent dome that overlooked the spaceport. From this vantage point, they could see the fleet preparing for departure. Engineers made final adjustments, crew members said farewells to family, and supply vessels made their last deliveries. Representative Ta found himself standing beside Commander Jun, who had once been the strongest voice against human inclusion. "Did you ever imagine we would be here like this when that first plasma bolt was absorbed?" Tai asked quietly. Jun shook his head. "I was certain they were a threat. I've never been happier to be proven wrong." He gestured toward the fleet. "My own daughter is serving as tactical officer on the 3rd vessel. 6 months ago, I would have forbidden it." Ambassador Hyun approached the 2 officials, joining their conversation. "The most valuable thing we can discover isn't out there in unexplored space," she said. "It's what we learn about ourselves when we encounter the truly different." Across the observation deck, representatives from species that had once been bitter enemies now stood side by side, united in purpose. The Ventori and the Palaxians, whose 1,000-year conflict had claimed billions of lives, were collaborating on navigation systems. The Druthi and Ganthar, separated by religious differences for centuries, had jointly developed new propulsion enhancements. As the departure sequence began, Leader Day called for attention. "Today marks not just the launch of an exploration fleet, but the beginning of a new era for all our peoples," she announced. "Look around you. See what we have accomplished together in just 6 months. Imagine what we might achieve in the centuries to come." The gathered representatives watched as the fleet lifted off one ship at a time, their hulls gleaming in the light of Centauri Prime's sun. As each vessel rose, its plasma absorption systems activated, creating beautiful patterns of flowing energy across their surfaces. The TES Resilient was the last to depart. As it lifted majestically from the spaceport, its hull began to pulse with brilliant blue light, not from absorbing weapons fire this time, but as a deliberate display. The energy formed patterns that represented the symbols of all council species flowing together in harmony. Ambassador Hyun stood at the edge of the observation deck, watching her former command begin its new mission. Beside her, Leader Day spoke softly. "When your ship first appeared in our space, I feared it might be the beginning of the end for the Council." "And now?" Hyun asked. Day smiled. "Now I know it was simply the end of the beginning. The real journey starts today." As the ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and disappeared into the depths of space, the representatives remained on the observation deck, bound together by a shared purpose that transcended their differences. The Galactic Council had been transformed, not by force of arms, but by the unexpected power of openness. 6 months had passed since the humans first arrived in Council space. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council looked very different now. The once cold and formal room felt warmer and more welcoming. Human representatives sat in newly created seats among the 37 alien species. Where tension and fear once ruled, friendship and trust now flourished. Leader Da walked into the chamber with a sense of pride. She remembered the day when Captain Hyun's ship had absorbed their most powerful weapons without firing back. That day had changed everything. "The council will now begin," she announced, her voice carrying through the room. The chamber quieted as Ambassador Hyun stepped forward. 6 months ago, she had been Captain Hyun of the TES Resilient. Now she served as humanity's chief diplomat to the Council. "Thank you, Leader Da," Hyun said with a respectful bow. "I am pleased to report that our joint fleet is ready for its first mission." Behind her, a large display showed the TES Resilient surrounded by ships of various designs. The human vessel now served as the flagship of this new exploration fleet. Its sleek hull had been modified with symbols representing all Council species. With human plasma absorption technology, these ships can travel farther than ever before, Han explained. They can explore regions we once thought too dangerous or remote. Science Director Sun nodded enthusiastically. "This technology has done more than improve our ships," he added. "Energy production systems across Council space now use these same principles. Planets that once fought over power sources now have more than they need." Several older Council members looked at each other in wonder. For centuries, wars had raged across the galaxy as civilizations battled for energy resources. 3 major conflicts had ended in the past month alone, as the new technology spread. The expedition team includes scientists from all Council species, Ambassador Hyun continued, smiling as she looked around the room, including our newest members from the Croton Empire. All eyes turned to Emperor Je. The Crotons had been the most resistant to human contact. For generations, they had conquered rather than cooperated. Their military might was legendary, as was their distrust of outsiders. Emperor Ji stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the chamber floor. "My people have much to learn about strength through openness," he said, his deep voice softer than usual. "For too long, we believed power came from what we could take by force. The humans have shown us a different path." Leader Da remembered how Commander Jun had once demanded the destruction of the human ship. Now Jun served as military liaison to the human delegation, one of the strongest supporters of the new alliance. In the center of the Council chamber stood the most visible sign of this transformation, a beautiful monument unveiled just weeks earlier. It was a simple sphere that absorbed light from all directions. Instead of blocking the light, it converted the energy into a gentle glow that filled the entire room. The monument used the same principles as the ship's defensive systems, but for creation rather than protection. Around its base, words in every Council language formed a circle, in honor of first contact with humanity, who taught us that the strongest defense isn't in our weapons, but in our willingness to share, learn, and grow together. "The fleet departs tomorrow," Ambassador Hyun announced. "I invite all Council members to join us on the observation deck for the ceremony." Later that day, as the sun began to set, representatives from all 38 species gathered on the massive observation platform overlooking the spaceport. Below them, crews made final preparations on the ships of the joint fleet. Representative Tai, who had first announced the arrival of the human vessel 6 months earlier, stood near the railing. "I never imagined this outcome when that strange ship appeared on our sensors," he said to no one in particular. Beside him, Defense Minister Jin nodded. "I was certain they came to conquer us," he admitted. "When their ship absorbed our weapons fire, I thought we were doomed." "And now?" asked Ambassador Hyun, joining their conversation. Jin smiled, something he rarely did before the humans arrived. "Now I understand that true strength lies not in having the most powerful weapons, but in having the wisdom to know when not to use them." Across the observation deck, former enemies stood side by side, planning joint research projects or discussing cultural exchanges. The Veleks and the Morden, whose bitter rivalry had lasted for 12 generations, now worked together on a shared mission. The religious leaders of the Dreth Collective, once isolationists who believed contact with aliens would taint their purity, eagerly learned human languages. As twilight deepened, Leader Day called for attention. The crowd fell silent as lights illuminated the ships below. "Today we witnessed not just the launch of a fleet," she said, "but the birth of a new era. 6 months ago, we feared the unknown. Today, we embrace it together." One by one, The ships powered up their engines. The hulls began to glow with the distinctive blue light of human plasma technology. Unlike the harsh glare of traditional drives, this energy flowed like water across the surfaces of the vessels. The TES Resilient was the last to activate its systems. As its hull brightened, patterns appeared across its surface, symbols representing every council species flowing together in harmony. Ambassador Hyun watched her former ship with pride. Beside her, Emperor Ji of the Croton Empire spoke quietly. "When we first detected your vessel, I ordered our fleet to prepare for war," he confessed. "We assumed any advanced species would be a threat." "Many assume that," Hyun replied. "It's a natural response to the unknown." "What made humans different?" Ji asked. "Why did your people choose to share rather than dominate?" Hyun considered the question carefully. "Long ago, humans nearly destroyed ourselves through fear and greed. We learned the hard way that true security comes not from having better weapons than your neighbor, but from having no enemies in the first place." As the ships rose from the spaceport, their engines pushing against gravity, the gathered representatives watched in silent awe. Former adversaries stood shoulder to shoulder, united in purpose if not yet in complete trust. The vessels formed a perfect formation above the spaceport, then accelerated upward. One by one, they disappeared into the darkening sky, carrying representatives of 38 species toward distant stars. "They carry more than our flags and our people," Leader Day said softly. "They carry a new way of thinking." The last light of the departing Resilient faded from view. Below in the council chamber, the monument continued its gentle glow, a reminder of how quickly things could change when fear gave way to understanding. The Galactic Council had been transformed, not by force of arms, but by the unexpected power of openness. And this was just the beginning. The end